Hi, my name is Fred Elia, and I am the president of 1,000 Moms, which is a community organization project here in New York State in support of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and questioning youth who happen to be in the state's foster care system. And I'm here today with Dave Balog, who is our communications person and the author of this new book called Healing the Brain, which is about stress, trauma, and development. And he's going to give us an overview, and we're going to talk about some of the details because it's pretty exciting, and we'll see some videos, we'll look at some visuals as well, and come to some conclusions about how to help youth particularly, and then youth who are in the state's foster care system and other states as well, deal with the stress that comes with being lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or questioning, and in foster care. Okay, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. Yes, I've worked with Fred for many years on 1,000 Moms, and Fred and I are also life partners. We've been together for many years. And the book is kind of my background. I had about 15 years, well, 30 years total in book publishing, and 15 of them working with neuroscientists, brain scientists, the top researchers on the brain. So I was a medical writer, science medical writer, and I wrote a book called the Dana Source Book of Brain Science, which was widely used, had great resources from the foundation, and we were able to distribute this book worldwide. So we kind of married our ideas here, because as I began to get more involved with 1,000 Moms and with you in the training, I began to understand the connection between what happens in the brain and the behavior that happens to youth in foster adoptive care. And basically, there's also a universal aspect to this, that yes, we are focusing on LGBTQ youth in foster adoptive care, but the book is really contains many insights and concepts that
apply, right,
yeah,
exactly.
I mean, we talked last night about stress.
Right. It
stress
applies
is everywhere.
Right. I mean, really, it applies to everyone, particularly youth, and then, yes, the youth that we are targeting to help in our program, but it does give anybody an understanding of what typical development is like, brain development, emotional development, and then what can happen if there is stress and trauma to the point that it causes some kind of harm. So we in 1,000 Moms, and as you referenced in the training, and yes, you've become involved in that, talk about nurturing and what happens when a typical child is nurtured in their family by the parents, whomever the caregivers are, and then the difference between that and if there is the stress and trauma of abuse or neglect, and then removal to foster care. And then on top of that, what if the child happens to be gay, lesbian, bisexual, etc., and has to deal with that? So it's come together, I think, very well in this book, and helps people to understand the concepts underneath everything so that they can apply it to anyone, to someone they know, to themselves perhaps, right?
And one of the books, the authors that really kind of started our synthesis here was Abraham Maslow, Toward a Psychology of Being. One of my favorite books. I happen to work at the book publishing company that owned the rights. I read it 5 times, and then one day I saw it in your curriculum.
That's right. Right.
And what a coincidence.
Mm-hmm. So we were able to talk about that, and as you say, we're using it in what we do, and here it is in your book now, because it makes such sense to help people understand. And let's talk about that a little bit about, so in a typical child, nurtured the way we would all hope, what happens starting at birth as the child grows?
Well, it's basically, you also refer in your training to the cycle of need. You know, positive reinforcement, a child that gets positive reinforcement beyond the basics of food, clothing, shelter, touch is important. And we go into that. Why is touch important? It produces endorphins, not only for the child, but for the parent. And that bond between child and mother, child and father is very strong, particularly in mammals.
Exactly.
And
So,
if it doesn't go right, then we're inviting a whole host
right,
of
so it
problems.
starts with the basics, as you say, the basic physical needs are met, food, water, whatever, and then goes to safety needs. That's the next piece of that pyramid. Safety needs are met, we hope, by the parents and caretakers, and then we can move up the line to further, in the end, self-actualization, people contributing, helping others, whatever it may be. And you would have a hard time getting all the way to the top if your basic needs haven't been met.
That's
and
right.
up the line, right?
That's right.
So,
That's right. You can't go from the top down.
Right, exactly. So we'll show this pyramid. It's here in the book, but we're going to, just so you can see, but we're going to have it on screen as well. So,
Right. And it's a very positive message, I found.
Right.
I found the book very positive, and incorporating it into the training in the book, I think, it's a realistic goal of this isn't rocket science here. This is good nurturing.
Exactly, right. But what's a point about this, I think that folks might want to understand. Often people think that, especially in foster care, if a child comes to foster care and is with a loving, caring, well-trained person or family, that why aren't they doing very well? And how come there's still issues with behavior, usually, I hear from foster
Right.
parents and adoptive parents. But the child is still hiding peanut butter under the bed every day, even though there's plenty of food. And it looks to me like, so the love and belonging piece is in the middle here, and they're giving that to the child. But if the child didn't have basic physiological or safety needs met
Right.
along the way before that and doesn't feel that,
Right.
maybe
Well,
there
Fred,
would
we're
be
going to get into more detail about this as we
Okay.
go on, but we have a video
Oh,
just
okay, good.
to sort of dip our toes in the water here in the concept of what is happening with the body with stress. So
Exactly.
we have a video here we're going to show, and we're going to come back and talk about it. It's called Stress in the Brain.
Okay, great.
Or otherwise known, Why Don't Zebras Get Ulcers?
Right, that's right, because I was going to say, that's right. We have a visual of a zebra here, and it's there for a reason.
Right.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
Imagine for a moment that you live on a savanna like this one. The day is warm. The food is plentiful. You're grazing at daybreak. Suddenly, you sense an attack. Your pulse races. Your heart pounds.
Everything that's going on in your body is fabulous because it's saving your life. You're running for your life, lions coming after you. What do? You mobilize energy because you need it for your thigh muscles. Your blood pressure goes up so you can deliver the energy to your thigh muscles in 2 seconds instead of 3.
It's fight or flight in action. Our stress response system at work. Within seconds, it increases our energy and starts shutting down longer-term projects like fighting disease. And what happens to us in our modern, increasingly urban environment? Our well-honed tools of fight or flight were developed to face the life and death challenges of the savannah, not the kind of life we face today, where stress is not an occasional incident, but rather a non-stop series of daily pressures.
So why don't zebras get ulcers? They don't worry about mortgages, they don't worry about blind dates, they don't worry about the ozone layer, they worry about lions. For them, stress is 3 minutes of some screaming terror on the savannah where it's either over with or they're over with very shortly afterward. They don't have chronic psychological stress. You get us, and suddenly we're smart enough to have invented all sorts of nonsense that is purely psychological, purely social, and our basic punchline as a person is the system didn't evolve for chronic activation, it's evolved for the short-term crisis. Turn it on chronically and you increase your likelihood of getting sick somewhere along the way.
For over 20 years, Dr. Sapolsky has been studying the effects of stress on our brains and bodies. The major culprits in this damage are 2 hormones.
Adrenaline is the first hormone on the scene, and one of the first things it does is it works at your heart, it works at your blood vessels, up goes your heart rate, up goes your blood pressure.
At the same time, the brain's hypothalamus moves into action. It signals the pituitary to stimulate the adrenal gland. That gland releases the body's longer-acting stress hormone, cortisol. It's a powerful steroid that mobilizes energy, but over time, cortisol can harm almost every system of our bodies.
If you constantly mobilize energy, you never store it, your muscles waste away, you're exhausted all the time. If you constantly increase your blood pressure, you're going to get more vascular damage. If you shut down digestion, you're more at risk for an ulcer.
And we're back.
Okay. All right. So now we have some idea,
Yeah.
and it's right in the book. So why don't zebras get ulcers?
Well, I can give you a quick answer to that,
Okay.
a 30-second answer. For zebras, stress is a short-term phenomenon. It's 3 minutes of some screaming terror on the savannah where they're being chased by a lion, and one of two things is going to happen. The zebra will be lunch for the lion, or the zebra will survive and get over the stress. Zebras don't have chronic stress. And the concept for this really must tip of the hat to Dr. Robert Sapolsky, who wrote a book of the same title. He's a researcher at Stanford University. And the concept here, and we can talk just a little bit, is that for zebra, we as a species, as you know, through the millennia, we were designed not for long-term stress, not for chronic stress, because, as you can see in this picture of the, we call it the HPA coordinate. When we sense a stress, Fred, and we sense it in our brain, we then send signals to the pituitary gland, also in the brain. That sends signals to the adrenal cortex. Fight or flight. Activate these emergency chemicals, chief of which is cortisol, which is great. It's going to save the zebra, activate the more muscle to the legs, more muscle to the heart. That zebra's really got it going. It's fight or flight. However, we humans have found a way not to turn it off. Cortisol is a steroid, and activated chronically, it can damage every part of the body.
Okay. Now, here's something I think people would want to know, that it's not just something emotional that's going on or in your head with something that's stressful,
Very
but it's physical.
Absolutely.
And there can be consequences
That's
if
right.
it's continued or if it's prolonged in some way.
Right.
Okay, all right.
And in general, humans, and we can talk to Thomas Edison, talk about Thomas Edison, we've found a way to turn on stress 24/7, nonstop, with the light bulb, the smartphone, the tablet. We're going 24 hours. We as humans have invented chronic stress, and we have to learn, in general, and in particularly with these youth, we have to learn how to shut it off. Best idea I got from our anti-bullying training: screens off at 9 p.m. Screens off.
Right.
Things like that. The family meal,
Right.
which we'll talk about. Other concepts.
Exactly. So we have to think about this
in
now.
our next segments.
Right. Okay. All right.
All
Okay.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
Okay, Dave. So let's hear more now that we've gotten the introduction to the book about the brain itself, because that's what we're saying, that a lot is going on that's physical, and it's all about the brain.
Yeah, that's right, Fred. I'll try in 3 minutes to give
in
a
a short-
whirlwind tour of the brain, which is, the brain is remarkable. It really is remarkable, and we're titling the segment, "What is this thing called the brain?" And I want to start by quoting Dr. Max Cowan, a late neuroscientist who I had the great pleasure of working with. And he wrote this: "Every aspect of our life, depends on the normal functioning of our brains. Our education depends on it. The education of our children depends on it. Our relationships to our fellow humans depend on it. Our hopes and aspirations are all represented in our brain. And all of these human qualities are at risk if something goes wrong with one's brain. So the brain is really the command center in ways that I don't think before the computer revolution and imaging that we really realized. You know, we used to associate love with the heart. Well, no, not really.
I mean, you need the heart,
nice,
but right,
yes.
exactly. But if it weren't for the brain, a lot wouldn't be happening at all, right? Okay, so so let's take a look, because you have a visual in the book, and we want to bring that up on the screen so that we can see what is it, what does it look like, and where are things happening, how is it happening? Okay.
Well, in this visual here, you'll see 4 sort of scans of the brain. And this was called the image, just for many years, just the image. It was created by Dr. Marcus Rakel of Washington University, St. Louis. We have it in the book. What's happening here is this is brain imaging of, if you go from clockwise from left to right, upper left, clockwise from upper left, the part of the brain that's activated when it's hearing words is the auditory cortex. You see that lit up there. When we see words, that's the visual cortex in the back. When we speak words, that's Broca's area, which unfortunately is subject to damage when people have strokes, often. And then thinking about words, well, that's another part of the brain. That's the frontal cortex, where we're thinking. That's the last evolved part of the brain. And so it's complicated. And we're going to take a closer look at the brain with this video.
Okay,
looking inside the brain.
Okay, so we're going to have a video to help us understand that. Very good, thanks.
Okay, and then we'll be back.
A century ago, the X-ray was invented. It was a revolution in medicine, giving doctors an astonishing new view into the body. But it was little use for examining the brain. Starting in the 1970s, computers offered views of the brain with new technologies such as CAT, PET, and MRI. Brain imaging today is developing faster than ever and has become an amazing tool, not just for medicine, but for basic science as well. MIT professor Nancy Kanwisher uses functional MRI to study how we see, how the brain's outer surface, or cortex, processes visual information from the eyes.
In your research, what are you finding with this technology that wasn't possible before?
Well, we're looking at the structure of visual cortex, and what we find is that little parts of visual cortex, this whole chunk of the brain in the back, little parts are specialized for stunningly specific functions. So the part that I started off looking at, which is right behind my right ear, and we'll see in a little while where yours is, it's very specialized for looking at faces. So right now, mine is going like mad, and right now it's off and on and off and on, just like that.
Depending whether you're looking at my face or
Any
looking
face.
to the side.
If any face that I look at, that little area gets active. Anything that's not a face, it'll turn off.
Why are faces special? They're at the center of our lives as social primates. We are intensely attuned to smiles and frowns, and we care about who's who, friend versus foe, collaborator or competitor. Faces are so critical to our lives that a part of our brain is dedicated to seeing them. Dr. Kanwisher invited me for my own scan.
Now, you want your ears to be folded back. Yeah.
Functional MRI uses an intense magnetic field that reveals which parts of the brain are getting more blood or less. More blood flows to brain areas that are working harder.
Okay, Garrick, all you need to do is lie there, hold still, real still, and look attentively at the pictures.
I watched a series of photographs prepared by Dr. Kanwisher and colleague Kathy O'Craven, and a few hours later, my scan had been analyzed.
Nancy, what are we seeing here? What's happening?
What I can show you is the part of your brain that responded more strongly when you were looking at faces than when you were looking at anything else. And there it is right there.
The yellow stuff.
That one little spot, that is your face area.
And that is where?
Just like mine, it's just behind your right ear, exactly.
A tiny dot back there. The actual size of this part of the brain is quite small.
Tiny. It's
Which is
it's
what
the size of a
layman's-
frozen pea, roughly.
A pea size.
Yep. Now let me show you what it does. Here is its activity over the 5 minutes of the videotape that you looked at.
So the peaks are,
Yeah, so there's 3 big peaks, and those are the 3 periods when you were looking at faces.
The structure of places, rather than faces, is processed by another brain area found by Dr. Canwisher's team. This brain region helps us not only see the overall shape of a place, but to imagine it, to think about it.
And we're back.
Okay. All right. Well,
Fascinating imaging. Imaging is really important because before the computer revolution in the 70s, before that, the only person to have ever seen a living brain was a brain surgeon. Now we have all sorts of imaging in real time to see what's going on in the brain, which is a remarkable structure, series of structures. And if you see in this image of the, I've outlined an image here of different structures of the brain. The brain is not one unit. It is not, it is a, I like the comparison of it's a continuous power plant. Most people say, oh, I use 10% of the brain. No, that's not true. You use 100%. And over the millennia, the brain has built up in our species like a nonstop power plant. Building with the basic structures you see at the bottom here, the hippocampus, the amygdala, the hypothalamus, the brainstem, which controls breathing, walking, basic heart, controls the heart function, heartbeats. But over the millennia, what separates us from other species, we've developed, you see at the top, the cerebrum, the cortex.
Right.
These are the thinking parts
and I
of the
think
brain.
that's what people think the brain is.
Right. It's
but
much more.
if it weren't for these more basic, on the photo, smaller parts, the cerebrum wouldn't be doing very much.
Right. And then the next image you see, this is sort of a schematic of 2 brain cells communicating.
Okay.
And that is really, we call it the relay race of life, how all of those structures that we just talked about communicate.
Okay.
Astonishing. Over 200 miles an hour. It's an amazing structure. A healthy brain is important for living, and it's important, what we will see when we talk about addiction, how things can go wrong.
All right. Okay, so thanks for giving us this overview of what the brain actually is, so we can understand better
Yes.
the effects of stress. Okay.
Great. Thank you for
Okay. Okay, great, Dave. So we now have an understanding of the basics of the brain itself as a physical entity. And we want to talk now about substance abuse, of course, in people. But I see a visual here starting off with what looks like a mouse or maybe a small rat.
Yeah.
So let's hear about how this is connected to the discussion.
Right. Well, first, I think it's important to say, Fred, that with stress and trauma, a lot of times, I think the point of what 1,000 Moms is about and what the book is about is the way we deal with the trauma is we medicate it, either through illegal substances, we call them substances of abuse, or through legal substances. But how about we take a look at the stress and the trauma and what's happening? And the reason for our little mouse here is that animal models are really important. The little mouse here contains 90 to 95% of the same genes that you and I have. So they're really valuable to understand how the brain works, how the stress response works. So, and it's important in addiction research. We have so much to learn about that. And I know any parent can tell you it's a real issue facing our society. Schools can tell you there's a heroin epidemic. So
what you're saying, and people are familiar with the idea of mice and studies, in this case we're also talking about not just their behavior, but how it happens in their brains too. And you're saying that's similar. Okay.
Right.
So those studies help us to understand this.
Right. And we're going to look at a short video here featuring singer-songwriter Judy Collins, who is going to talk about depression, substance abuse, and other factors, suicide, that run in her family. And I think many people will be able to identify with this video.
Right, okay. All
So
right.
let's take a look.
Okay, let's look.
Rows and flows of angel hair and ice cream castles in the air, feathered canyons everywhere. I've looked at clouds that way and now.
Even through the highest moments of a remarkable career, depression followed Judy Collins.
It's like a huge black cloud. And all of a sudden, you know, this thing will be on me. I'm not good enough. There's nothing I can do.
It started in her teenage years and got so bad, she tried to take her own life.
My depression today is as vivid to me when it comes on me as it was when I was 14.
For Collins, depression wove itself into another disease, alcoholism, which damaged her voice and almost ended her career.
How can they know?
At 39, she found her way to treatment.
I was lucky enough to find out that alcoholism and depression are diseases. They're chemical imbalances.
For the winter fire.
Collins began to recognize her depression as a family legacy. The disease caused devastation through several generations. For her father, for herself, and most of all for her son Clark, who committed suicide in 1992. She learned firsthand the importance of treating depression as a life-threatening disease.
What do you do with somebody who's got a cancer, a bone cancer? What do? You get him into treatment. And depression should be treated just as pragmatically.
Okay, great. So we now have an idea of depression and the effects of that, and we now know that it can be definitely something physical going on with the brain. Not that it's just emotional or something, again, about the heart or whatever.
For a long time, people thought depression was just get over it. There's more going on there. And research is really, in a way, just beginning. There was a saying at the Dana Foundation where I worked, that if we did an analogy to Columbus's trip to the New World, he's getting the money from Queen Isabella right now. That's the analogy to where we are with understanding this amazing thing called the brain.
Right, that's right.
So in the video that we're talking with Judy Collins, what's happening with substance abuse, basically that system that we talked about, we have another image here of an axon connecting to a dendrite, sending messages. That's the key to optimal functioning of the brain. You want that system to be clear, functioning.
Right. So you can't will it, as we have heard in the past, like you're saying with depression, get over it. You can't just say, I'm not going to be depressed today.
Well, there's a debate. I mean, the talk therapy versus psychiatric examination. There's a debate now. You need both.
Okay.
There's a school of thought that you need both. Mm-hmm. But basically, getting to the what's happening with addiction, depression. Well, let's focus on addiction. Basically, the system here where one cell is communicating to another, in this chemical messages are being sent through what's called the synapse. Well, when we get into addiction, we're gumming up the works. This is we get an initial rush. We get dopamine receptors blocked, and we get it results in a rush of dopamine, which is an extreme high, good feeling.
Right.
But guess what?
So something physical is happening or not happening. is what you're saying.
Well, yeah, basically.
In the brain, or yes, in the brain.
Right.
With depression,
we're
with,
messing with
addictions.
We're messing with the normal functioning
Of how it
of
works.
the
Okay.
transmitting the
Right.
messaging system. The basic of food, the pleasure reward center is this thing called the mesoaccumbens nucleus, and it's involved in all pleasurable activities: sleeping, well, not so much like eating, sexual pleasure. All kinds of pleasure, and it's regulated by this chemical called dopamine, which is also implicated in functioning, ambulatory functioning, and lack of dopamine,
Okay.
Parkinson's.
So folks may want to take a look at the book so that they can understand this in a little more detail, right?
Right.
Okay, great.
So,
okay.
and just to conclude the segment, the actor Richard Pryor was, the late comedian Richard Pryor was very open and candid about his experience with drug abuse. And someone asked him one time, Richard, what do you feel when you do cocaine? And his answer was very telling. He said, I feel like wanting to do more cocaine. So we're talking about substances that can arrest our brains, hijack our brains, mimic. Nature's very clever. Nicotine, cocaine have structures, chemicals that can gum up the works. They can occupy those receptors along the pathway in our brains where we should be using natural chemicals. Well, guess what? Nicotine fits very nicely
Right.
into a receptor. Dopamine,
Okay.
the same.
All right.
Cocaine can imitate.
Right. Okay. And so people can learn more in detail about this in the book.
That's right.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, now, this is great, Dave, that you've gotten us to this point in understanding the brain, its functions, what can happen when it isn't functioning the way it would typically because of substance use, because of a condition like depression. Now, let's hone in right on what we're all about, our organization, 1,000 Moms, and what folks out there I'm sure interested in, which is youth, teenagers. What is happening there? And let's talk a bit about how it's different. It's not the same as a young child, and it's not the same as a fully developed adult.
Right.
Okay.
Right. In adolescence, the brain is in a great transition. And just think about it. Hormones are kicking in. Sexuality is kicking in as a result of the hormones. But one thing I want to focus on just a little bit, because it's very illustrative, is the hormone melatonin, which is secreted by a gland called the pineal gland, kind of behind the eyes here. And that is changing in teenagers. Basically, the pineal gland is changing, growing, and it's secreting this melatonin, which many people have probably heard of. It's sold in many stores.
You hear that? I hear the word, right.
Yeah. But it's a natural substance, and a teenager's body, a teenager's brain is telling it it's secreting this hormone later in the evening. So basically, it's the brain is telling a teenager, sleep later, stay asleep longer in the morning. And that kind of flies in the face of what our educational system is doing and has done for many years. Let's schedule those classes early.
Right, 7:30, 7:40, whatever it was when we were in
Teenagers
school.
are groggy, sleepy, they can't learn as well.
Okay, so now we know this, and you're saying this is typical, this is normal, this is what to
Yes,
be expected
that's right.
of a person of those ages in their teenage years.
Yeah.
So we don't want to fight it or...
Well, we don't want to fight it. We want to work with it. We want to address it. I mean, what's the point of dragging kids into class if they can't learn?
Right.
I mean, just an anecdote. I remember my father he couldn't understand. When I was a teenager at home, I just wanted to sleep in the morning. What's the matter with you? What's the matter with you? But it's natural. You know,
Okay. And I imagine it depends. And for some youth, maybe more so than others. Maybe some don't need as much sleep and others need more than an average or a norm. But it's an issue. Right.
Right. And then another area we want to talk about is risky behavior in teens. There's a researcher out there, a drug researcher, who has paid her daughter $2,500 if she will not do drugs until she's 21. The reason being, studies have shown if teenagers can put off doing that, they will have developed enough control in a section we'll talk about, the frontal lobe, that they will be less likely to take risky behaviors. Why do states issue driver's licenses at age 21? Because the brain, I don't know if states know this implicitly, but it's out there. The brain is not fully formed until 21, 22. And the last part to develop is this section, and we have a photo here, we have a graphic here, the frontal lobe in the front of the brain, which sort of acts as a cerebral brake. It involves judgment. It gives youth time to think about consequences of what they're doing. And as I said, it's the last part of the brain to be developed. So.
Right. So in the area of focus of 1,000 Moms, and you talk about some of this in the book too, where we have youth who have been abused or neglected, who have been taken into foster care because they can't be with their family, who then may use illegal substances to feel better because they are depressed or they're upset, whatever it may be, but something's going on that they can't handle. So now we're talking about not typical. We can understand a little bit about what's typical, but if we disturb what's typical, if we cause some kind of trauma to that, we're going to have to see and deal with the consequences.
That's right. That's right. And you know, I think as we talked about the concept of the book, the concept of 1,000 Moms is, well, let's not medicate this. We got to take a closer look. As Marcia Novi, your great partner and founder, co-founder of 1,000 Moms, that, you know, behavior is the language of emotions, and emotions come from this thing called the brain.
Right. That's right.
So if parents want to know what's happening with their youth, I think it would be very important for them to understand, well, where is this coming from?
Right.
And especially in a traumatized brain, which we're going to talk about in our next segment, there's a lot going on. And I think knowledge is our friend. Knowledge is our...
Exactly. So we want to understand what's happening, what the foundation is, what's behind it, so that we can help, and in our case, help folks prevent some things from happening, because a youth has undergone extreme stress and now trauma, which we'll get into, but these things are disturbing what's supposed to be happening with a young person as they grow and develop.
So I want to read just a segment here from excerpt from 3 doctors who wrote about the teen brain, and I think it would be very illustrative. This is by Dr. Floyd. 3 doctors: Dr. Floyd Bloom, Dr. Flint Beal, and David Kupfer, who wrote, "Adolescence has been described as a busy time for the human brain. It's also a time of transition, as the brain, like the rest of the body, physically eases into adulthood, and in the process, the brain's gray matter absorbs an explosion of new external stimuli. A large part of adolescent development takes place, as we said, in the frontal lobes, which has an incredible number of faculties that we use many times a day, each day. Here are the brain sites that enable us to make sense of the floods of information constantly being gathered by our 5 senses, to know when we are experiencing an emotion, and to even think about it while we're feeling it, to understand and keep track of the passage of time, and to hold a thought or an object briefly in the forefront of our mind while we proceed with another thought, an ability known as working memory. So according to recent animal studies, from the mouse, a study of frontal lobe development, several different transporter molecules, which help neurons take in neurotransmitter molecules and break them down for reuse, either increase in density during adolescence or reach a plateau, which in turn alters some signaling pathways and stabilizes others. Partly from refinements in the signal circuits of the frontal lobe, and partly through accumulated experience, adolescence gradually brings greater independence, along with new capacities to plan, to consider the possible consequences of an action, and to take responsibility for the conduct of one's life. Not surprisingly, for a major executive center, the frontal lobes must reorganize to meet new demands, and they do so at more than one level in the years leading up to adulthood. One of the most significant changes, which actually occurs well into adulthood, is a major increase in myelination, or insulation, of the nerve fibers going both into and out of the frontal lobes. Greater insulation here means faster signaling and perhaps more highly branched signaling pathways between the frontal lobe neurons and those in any distant region of the brain. Remember, we talked, the brain is not one unified structure, it's communicating
Right.
with different parts. So this is a development that we can understand on an everyday level. Clearly, the more information the executive center can gather in various modes, visual signals, the empathic tone of one's voice, the emotions of the moment, the more nuanced and appropriate the brain's responses can be.
Okay, so the lesson we're taking from this on the teenage brain is that there's still room to grow, you could say, but we have to understand that
It's
that
not
is
an
what's
adult
going on.
brain.
That's right, it's not the same thing.
Right.
And if there is stress or trauma, you're going to have problems,
Right.
which you expect.
At a most crucial development. I mean, early childhood is very important,
Right, okay.
but
All right.
also in the adolescent brain.
All right, thanks, that's good. We now accomplished another piece of the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
Okay, Dave, so we talked about the pieces leading up to trauma, finishing just previously with teenagers and how that brain is not fully developed, and that, of course, if there's trauma to the brain, you're going to have consequences. What I'm interested in, and maybe the viewers and readers of the book would be, is we're used to hearing about physical trauma, an injury, a literal physical injury, an accident in a car, a motorcycle, you fall. That's one you hear about a lot now, a concussion. But I also know from being a social worker and dealing with the issues, as we've said in 1,000 Moms, that there's emotional trauma. And maybe you could say something about the two of those, similarities, differences.
Right. Well, in the book we talk, the phrase I refer to, not original, but we'll see the credit in the book, wounds that time won't heal. And verbal abuse can be just as strong as physical abuse. But the concept of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is really only 30 years old, 35 years old. The image we have here, first off, is of a soldier. And the Veterans Association, which has done fantastic research, and we include that in our book, first focused in on post-traumatic stress disorder 36 years ago. It was associated with physical trauma, but within the last 10 years, PTSD is now diagnosed in children, in infants. And I mean, there's the obvious physical form of it, perhaps shaken baby syndrome,
Right.
which can be devastating. But there's also the verbal, emotional part of that. There was a movie a few years ago that I especially took a liking to. It was Prayers for Bobby. It was a real-life story of a gay youth who unfortunately committed suicide But there was a saying in the movie, children are listening. From an early age, children are listening to what adults are saying, and particularly gay youth, and you may want to amplify this, gay youth are listening. And there was an ad, I thought it was very well done recently. It's directed at parents. It said, don't be your child's first bully. Because as Marcia and you said in the beginning, how many parents need to be trained to be sensitive about LGBT?
Right. Everyone.
Everyone. It's exactly right. It's not 10%. It's not 20%.
Right, because you don't know who's listening.
Right. Right. And if we want a more tolerant society,
well,
we need
then
to be
everyone.
listening.
Right, exactly. So,
yeah. Yeah. So I'd like to just read a passage from the book, which kind of, I could say it in a lot better than I can say, and I spent some time putting this together. So this is a segment from the book called A Harvest of Psychiatric Disorders. Changes to normal body chemistry induced by physical, sexual, or psychological trauma in childhood may lead to psychiatric difficulties that show up in childhood, adolescence, or adulthood. The victim's anger, shame, and despair can be directed inward to produce symptoms such as depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation, or directed outward as aggression, impulsiveness, delinquency, hyperactivity, and substance abuse. Childhood trauma may fuel a range of persistent psychiatric disorders. One is somatoform disorder, also known as psychosomatic disorder, in which patients experience physical complaints with no discernible medical cause. And we've certainly come across that. Another is panic disorder with agoraphobia, fear of open spaces, in which patients experience the sudden acute onset of terror and may narrow their range of activities to avoid being outside, especially in public, in case they have an attack. People with PTSD keep re-experiencing a traumatic event in waking life or in dreams, and they actively avoid situations that might bring them back memories of the trauma. Kind of limits your life experience.
exactly. Right.
You know, one doctor I read said, well, you'll be leading a life indoors in some cases, which is very tragic.
Right.
It's not the way life is meant to be lived. But people with PTSD, back to the book, keep re-experiencing a traumatic event in waking life or in dreams, and they actually actively avoid situations that might bring back memories of the trauma. More complex, difficult to treat disorders strongly associated with child abuse are borderline personality disorder and dissociative identity disorder. Someone with borderline personality, and I've been told by research that is the toughest one. That is a really tough disorder to deal with. Someone with BPD characteristically sees others in black and white terms, first putting them on a pedestal and then vilifying them after some perceived slight or betrayal. Such people have a history of intense but unstable relationships, feel empty or unsure of their identity, often try to escape through substance abuse, and experience self-destructive impulses and suicidal thoughts. They're plagued by anger, and that anger is most often directed at themselves.
So I can say that in my experience over the years in dealing with children and youth in foster care, and then adults, because I was head of the organization of adults who were in foster care, this is something that you see, it's in records, you hear people talk about in their experiences in life from childhood right through adulthood, because there was abuse, neglect, and whether or not it was treated, perhaps it wasn't successful or successful enough that it's disappeared.
Right. One thing I always fascinated me in writing the book, it's a section here, what's called the increased startle response. researchers also think that childhood trauma may lead to what is called an exaggerated startle response into adulthood. And that puzzled some of my colleagues at the Dana Foundation. When startled, people experience a number of reactions. The heart may race, sweat increase, breath rate get faster, muscles tense, to the point someone might even jump, and people may feel scared. When someone jumps out from behind and yells boo, that may initiate a startle response. This is an ongoing area of investigation. Mm-hmm. But again, this is a behavior, and I think if parents, if social workers, can understand where this behavior might have emanated, I think we're all the better off for it. We understand, and we're not going to reach for the pill bottle to medicate something.
Right, and also understand that probably whatever it takes to overcome this is some kind of process, whether it's medicine, therapy, talk therapy, whatever combination, that's going to take time. That
Right.
it doesn't. We certainly don't know yet how to instantly deal with something and
Right.
resolve it.
Right. And we talk a bit in the book about we've alluded to it before here, the story of the Romanian orphans. And I know orphan is not an optimal word to use, but there were studies done on youth in the country of Romania when the Soviet Union the Eastern Bloc was collapsing, the end of the 90s. The parents, many kids were warehoused then, and they got only the basics of food, clothing, water, but not touch, not stimulation. So there was this concept of failure to thrive.
Right.
Their growth was stunted, and this is a chemical reaction of the stress hormone cortisol and others.
Yeah.
That literally.
So they just couldn't develop as they would typically,
Right.
because they didn't get what they needed, which is that emotional piece, the touch, and what goes with it.
Right. So I just want to conclude this section with I think this is a very telling paragraph. Strong or traumatized youth, we reap what we sow.
Okay.
Whether abuse of a child is physical, psychological, or sexual, it sets off a ripple of hormonal changes that wire the child's brain to cope with a hostile world. Abuse predisposes the child to have a biological basis for fear, though he may act and pretend otherwise. Early abuse molds the brain to be more irritable, impulsive, suspicious, and prone to be swamped by fight or flight reactions that the rational mind may be unable to control. To a brain so tuned, the Garden of Eden would seem to hold its share of dangers. Building secure, stable relationships may later require extraordinary personal growth and transformation.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that introduction to trauma to the brain in
Right.
its various forms.
Thank you for
All right, so we're in our last segment of what we've been talking about today in terms of trauma, stress, the brain, youth, and we really want to get to the point of what 1,000 Moms, our organization, is about, which is helping lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning youth who also happen to be in the foster care system. In some way, in what ways, actually, can we look at supporting these youth when we know that the reason they're in foster care is that there was some kind of abuse or neglect, to the point that it was noticeable, to the point that the authorities stepped in, to the point that they were removed from their families to foster care. So we know that there was stress, there was trauma, that double trauma, and we're even saying triple trauma, because now the youth has to deal with, well, I'm not typical because I'm gay, I'm lesbian, I'm transgender, or not even knowing perhaps these words or what that means at first as a child, trying to understand feelings and identity, which you said in the previous section can be really difficult when the brain has been traumatized. And we know that youth in foster care can have a difficult time with identity. And folks can know that I grew up in foster care myself and am gay, and so I fully understand the idea of what it's like to try to figure out who you are.
And you once said to me early on, you didn't know which one to deal with first.
That's right. That's right. And I chose to deal with the identity as to my family, personal identity, who I was connected to, before I could deal with the whole idea of sexuality, who I was attracted to, and what about that? Because it was too much.
Right.
Exactly. So
let's talk about Dr. Bill Buffy.
Exactly. Right. Someone we both know. An interesting story too, how that happened, because it was his daughter, and we met first. His daughter, who was Miss New York State.
That's right.
And she contacted us and
very interested in LGBT causes.
That's
that was
right.
her platform.
That's right. It was her platform.
And
Claire
she
Buffy
sought
right?
us out.
That's right. And wanted to help, and did. That's
Could
right.
not have been more helpful, understanding, and she introduced us to her father.
That's right. And isn't that, it's just great that it works this way, because that's how everything happens with what we do. It's people contributing and helping in some way that makes sense to them, that they like doing. Even the reason we're here today, right? Our executive producer, Shelley Hamill, is one of the founding moms of 1,000 Moms. Mm-hmm. And so in the end, here we all are, right? But yes, so Bill Buffy is a physician.
And I just want to send a shout out to Dr. Ray Working, whose health has been tough recently. Founding mom
moms,
for
right?
years, showed up on our regular podcasts without fail. Thank you, Ray.
That's right.
We're pulling for you.
And folks may want to know that 1,000 Moms is made up of males as well as females. It's just the way we chose to name our organization. You can go to our website, 1000moms.org, to take a look at that. But anyway, so Bill
Dr.
Buffy.
Bill Buffy,
right.
yes. Claire's father, a physician in Indiana, very active in the LGBT cause out there. And
this was before we met him.
Right,
Right?
absolutely. Very active in supporting LGBT rights out there, and very concerned about the health and well-being of LGBT individuals.
Particularly young people.
Particularly young people, right. And we both met him. He came to one of our fundraisers, extremely generous. And Dr. Bill wrote an amazing paper to me. I mean, I'm finding that there's more and more research about LGBT, about us, about our community, about our health. But it wasn't always that case. And I want to talk a little bit about what Bill Buffy wrote, because I think it's very profound. And I know there's other research happening. I saw it researching the book, but it's still, we're underreported. We're not understood as well as we need to be. So this is what Dr. Buffy said, and I think it's very, very important. And I want to read as much as I can. It's included in the book. Bill wrote a paper entitled "Public Health Implications of Same-Sex Marriage." It was in the American Journal of Public Health, 2011. William C. Buffy, MD, and it's in our chapter called "Minority Stress and LGBTQ Youth." One only has to consider the rash of recent teen suicides resulting from anti-gay bullying to begin to comprehend the magnitude of the public health problem faced by this country and its LGBT sexual minority. Despite the prevalence of same-sex households, and I really want to reinforce this, things are getting better. We have a lot to do. So Dr. Buffy writes, despite the prevalence of same-sex households and campaigns to protect human rights, gay persons find the very nature of their being constantly debated within our legislative bodies, the courts, and the mainstream media. They are subject to ridicule and are commonly the targets of demeaning and derogatory slang terms or insensitive jokes. Their morality and value as human beings are frequently questioned by individuals and organizations ignorant or unaccepting of current medical and social science literature concerning the gay population. Being cast in such a light strongly contributes to the phenomenon known as minority stress, which members of this community experience in their struggle for validation and acceptance in our heterosexist society. And this is said by a heterosexual
Oh,
man.
right. That's right. It is.
So, unique to the LGBT form of minority stress, as opposed to minority stress engendered by societal prejudice based upon race, ethnicity, gender, or disability, is that one's sexual orientation usually is invisible to others. As a result, in addition to being the target of overt discrimination, LGBT individuals are constantly subject to subtle, inadvertent, or insensitive attacks on the core of their very nature, even by people who profess no disdain or disrespect by them. I think I can identify with that very strongly. He continues, for instance, if someone has a lesbian colleague but doesn't know the colleague's orientation, an innocent question, such as asking her if she has a boyfriend, rather than asking, are you seeing someone special, implies a judgment regarding what is normal. When the other is invisible, faceless, or nameless, it is common for those in power to ignore the reality of the other's existence and the challenges the other faces. This interplay of power and prejudice, whether overt or covert, constitutes the phenomenon of heterosexism. Written by a heterosexual.
Written by a heterosexual, right.
Similarities to the racism and sexism so prevalent during the civil rights movement of past generations are obvious. This sexual minority status is defined by a culture of devaluation, including overt and subtle prejudice and discrimination, one that creates and reinforces the chronic, everyday stress that interferes with optimal human development and well-being. LGBT individuals stigmatized by negative societal attitudes directed at the essence of their being struggle on a daily basis to balance the dual dangers of publicly engaging their need for equality and validation and remaining closeted to find some calm through an escape from public scrutiny. Many gay persons internalize such discrimination and prejudice. Fractured social support mechanisms and minority stress, associated low self-esteem, contribute to a high prevalence of self-destructive behaviors such as substance abuse, suicide, and risky sexual behaviors.
Okay.
Well, Dr. Buffy writes more, but I think it's very strong, powerful
Right.
language.
So, yes, and my conclusion, and I'm hoping folks in the audience would be that we have to learn something here. We have to absorb this information because we can't help if we're not aware. So your book is excellent in that way, and I'll refer to it again, Healing the Brain, because what we want to do is give folks a way to learn and understand so that they could be helpful. Maybe
Fred,
help themselves.
I just want to say this is not an encyclopedia, this is
No.
a start.
That's
This
right.
is a stepping
right,
stone.
Right. What is good, and I should say for folks who haven't seen it yet, though, is you do have resources
Right.
in the back of the book. So
For LGBT, we have
on the
resources
brain,
on the brain.
Right. That's right.
We want to, open the dialogue.
Right. And of course, there are more visuals in the book as well. So how can folks get the book?
Very easy. Go to Amazon.com. You can search by my name. It's the easiest way I find it.
Okay.
We're there.
So you can purchase the book directly.
Purchase
through
the
Amazon.
book directly.
Right. Okay.
Currently, we have a $9.95. People can visit our website, www.1000moms.org, which has a link to the book, but also describes
Oh, they can learn more,
programs.
of course, right. They can perhaps hear Dr. Bill Buffy. Is he on one of our podcasts?
Absolutely. He was
Okay.
on one of our early podcasts, one of our most listened to.
Great.
Yes, please. We have an archive of shows. We hope to bring back the podcast. But the website is got lots of information on who we are, what we do, and how we need your support. How we hope to get your support buy a copy of the book. That'd be the best support
It's
I
wonderful.
think you can
Right.
show.
Okay, thank you so much, and thanks to folks who have watched the program, and hopefully it's been interesting and informative, and perhaps you'll have a copy of the book as well.
Great. Thank you, Fred.